Tell me something good. Our Lenten Bible study continues. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Early in its history, the season of Lent was a time when new converts learned and prepared for their baptism on Easter Sunday, and they would study what was central to Christianity. So this year, the good folks at Sanctified Art have produced a new Lenten series that focuses on what was central to Jesus's ministry and teachings. And at the heart of it all, we find liberation, love, mercy, and grace. And that, my friend, sounds like really good news to me. Last week, we read from John chapter 2, and the good news was the story of Jesus' first miracle, turning water into wine at the wedding at Canaan. The good news was the abundance and hospitality of the kingdom of God. Tonight, we'll look at a parable that builds on that theme and it expands it to the exclusiveness and the extravagant welcome of the kingdom. So let's get into it. Tonight, we go to Luke chapter 14, verses 15 through 24. One of the dinner guests heard this and said to Jesus, "Blessed is anyone who will eat in the kingdom of God." Jesus responded, "A landowner was giving a large dinner and sent out many invitations. At dinner time, he sent his servants to say to those invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they began to excuse themselves, each and every one. The first one said to the servant, 'I've just bought some land and I need to go out and inspect it. Please send my regrets.' Another said, 'I've just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I need to go out and test them. Please excuse me.' A third said, 'I've just gotten married, so of course I can't come.' The servant returned and reported all this to the landowner. He became angry and said to the servant, 'Go into town, into the streets and alleys, and bring in those who are poor or crippled, and those who are blind or lame.' After doing so, the servant reported, 'Your orders have been carried out, and there's still room.' The landowner said to the servant, 'Go out and scour the side roads and the back roads and compel people to come in. I want my house to be full.' But I tell you, not one of those I had initially invited will taste a bite of my dinner." Now, the setting of our Lucan text is Jesus's third dinner at the home of a Pharisee. And during this particular dinner, Jesus gave 3 dinner table lessons. And our text is the third one. After Jesus taught about humility and inviting the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind to banquets because they cannot repay the host, one of the dinner guests proclaimed, "Blessed is anyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." Now, this is important because it gives us confirmation that those at this dinner understood Jesus's teachings, they understood Jesus's parables to be about the kingdom of God. So after this wonderful proclamation by the dinner guest, Jesus launches into the final parable of the evening. A wealthy landowner invites several folks to his very lavish banquet, only to have them decline the invitation as they gave priority to ordinary affairs instead of his invitation. Angered by this, the landowner ordered his servants to bring in the marginalized, bring in everybody until his house was full. Now, there are so many ways to teach this parable. There's lots of layers to this one, and there's no way to get to them all in such a short time tonight. But I'll start with the good news and then close with a couple of Lenten challenges. The good news is obvious: inclusion and an extravagant welcome. The good news is that God's invitation is extended further and wider than we think or imagine. And even we who emphasize the extravagant welcome and inclusive invitation of God, we may be surprised to see who shows up. And to me, that's really great news. Here's a brief commentary from the Sanctified Art folks. The season of Lent reminds us that God has extended such an extraordinary welcome to us. In Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, God, wholly beyond all human understanding, invited us in all of our brokenness into the community of divine presence, not because we earned a place, but because God created space. The banquet table in the kingdom of God is a metaphor for God's unconditional love. It's a metaphor for God's extravagant welcome, and it's a metaphor for God's abundance. And y'all know what I say when I consecrate communion, which is the table of the kingdom of God. You know, I often say this table is small, but it is large enough to accommodate everyone. All are welcome. And that's exactly what this parable teaches. Now for the two Lenten challenges. First, I think there's a challenge for us from the characters who declined the landowner's invitation. The guests who made excuses weren't doing anything inherently bad. You know, we're talking about purchasing land, work or farm life, about the oxen, and family life, the marriage. Nothing inherently bad about any of those things. Now, when we analyze their excuses, they turn out pretty comical, but the main takeaway is that it's the stuff of ordinary life. And here's the question: how often do we let our schedules, our to-do list, or other ordinary things get in the way or have a higher priority than giving witness to the kingdom of God? During this season of Lent, if our schedules are interfering with what we should be doing in regards to the church, in regards to the kingdom of God, then maybe we need to reflect upon what can we do to make time. Here's one thing about it: we always can make time for what we want to make time for. So how can we make more time if we're being distracted by the ordinary things? How can we make more time for the kingdom of God? What distractions do we need to control or get rid of so that we don't miss God's invitation to do good, to worship, and to give witness to God's kingdom? Sometimes we need to let go of the everyday ordinary for the extraordinary of God. Secondly, This parable is a great example of giving witness to the kingdom. I've already talked about, referenced giving witness to the kingdom several times. And something that you hear, a phrase that you hear often at Spirit of the Cross. And many of you have heard me teach about the now and not yet aspects of the kingdom of God. Yes, one day the kingdom of God will come in all of its fullness. That's when Jesus comes back. But in the meantime, we are to live as if the kingdom is already present. Doing that, living as if the kingdom is already present, is what I mean by giving witness to the kingdom. And I ran across some wonderful comments about the kingdom of God from Dan Foster, who has a blog that I subscribe to. It's called Backyard Church, but I want to share these words with you. Jesus teaches the kingdom of God is like something close enough to touch, like yeast working its way through dough, like seeds growing quietly in the ground, like a treasure hidden in a field, like a banquet where unexpected people are invited to the table. That's our passage tonight. He talks about forgiveness, reconciliation, generosity, and mercy. He talks about people learning how to see the world around them differently and then how to live differently with one another here and now. The center of his message isn't escape from earth, it's the arrival of something new within it. When Jesus talks about the kingdom of God, he almost never defines it. Instead, he points to moments. A tax collector climbs a tree just to catch a glimpse of him, and Jesus invites him over for dinner. A woman who's been excluded for years reaches out from a crowd and is called daughter in front of everyone. A blind man shouting on the roadside refuses to be silenced, and Jesus stops the whole procession to ask him what he wants. Again and again, the pattern is the same. Someone ignored is seen, someone ashamed is given dignity, someone pushed to the edge is brought back into community. The change happens in ordinary spaces, at tables, on roadsides, in crowds, in the middle of daily life. Jesus talks about the kingdom as though it arrives in moments like these. Not later, not somewhere else. Here, now. In this season of Lent, the good news is God's extravagant welcome and radical inclusion. God creates more than enough space, and God invites and welcomes everyone. Then, for our Lenten challenge, may we, who are followers of Jesus, get rid of the distractions that pull us away from giving witness to the kingdom. Let's share the good news by leading with love. Let's share the good news by practicing inclusion. Let's share the good news by extending an extravagant welcome. And let's share the good news by caring for the most needy. Let's ground ourselves in the good news this Lent. Until next week, God's abundant grace and peace.